goods which have been taxing for donkeys years. It makes no difference at all. That's the kind of bargain. Don't think it's so generous. They found a new avenue to tax all of us. Right, thank you. No, sorry, Vijaykumar, you wanted to say something. Achha, okay. Yes, please. Now I'm open to questions. Yes, please.
So I wanted to ask you about the consensual dispute resolution idea. In my humble opinion, I think it's extremely brilliant and extremely progressive because consensual dispute resolution has been used in resolution of disputes between nation states internationally as well. So why not incorporate it in India? And under the Companies Act as well, under Section 442, there is an effort to one day set up a mediation and conciliation panel. But keeping in mind basic principles of mediation and conciliation, such as the fact that the third-party facilitator must be neutral and unbiased, how would we set up the panel in this case? Who would the panel consist of? That is one question. And secondly, sir, you spoke about the fact that the resolution that would come into place consensually, according to you, should be subject to judicial review. So the idea of consensual dispute resolution, according to me, and under basic principles of mediation and conciliation, is that you only enter into the conciliation agreement if it is agreeable to you. And if it is not agreeable to you, you have alternate methods. You can always go back to court. So the basic assumption is that if you are signing the agreement, you are forfeiting your right to adjudicate upon it later. And even under the Conciliation Act, right to appeal, etc. is extremely limited. So how would you respond to that with respect to judicial review?
Well, let me first clarify. I did say that if the decision is reached by consensus, it is subject to judicial review. No, I didn't say that. So possibly you are laboring under that impression. No, I didn't say that at all. In fact, what I said is that they have possibly intended that it should be a dispute resolution mechanism by consensus. Some kind of a resolution mechanism for resolution of dispute rather than adjudication. So that was an inappropriate, because if it is adjudication, then a whole lot of other issues come. That's what I have pointed out. And you are right, absolutely. If it is a conciliation, then there is no question of appeal, challenge, etc. They don't arrive at all. And that is possibly what they must be, council must be attempting to do. So. That's the whole object. The whole object is to reduce friction as much as possible.
So my first question was with respect to who the panel would consist of.
We don't know. That only Mr. Arnab can tell us.
Just like to add, see, the basic reason why 279B was asked by the states to be deleted from this bill was that we don't want that mechanism.
Yeah.
When we are talking about consensus, why in the bill itself have 279B? That means what we were visualizing such an event. So that's the basic reason, and it was the states. It was not the center who did away with it. It was the states who came on board and said that you do away.
So I made a good case. I made a very good case without being a party to this, council. But they misfired by using a wrong word.
Sir, just I have one small doubt. This is with regard to Article 286, which talks about restrictions, basically. Okay, now we have deleted clause 3.
Yeah.
Okay, basically that was there. Now we have deleted. Now let us say, presume a hypothetical situation, probably just academic point of view, that currently state basically the declared goods are concerned, and where the parliament can buy under CST law, they have put lot of restrictions. Currently not more than 5% taxes can be imposed. Now tomorrow clause 3 is not there now, no more is there.
Yeah.
And similar provisions we don't have for the GST or GST is concerned. Let's say tomorrow the state backed out from these things are concerned, they come up with it. Does it mean on declared goods they can impose whatever the tax rate they wish they may have? Now there is no restriction as such.
This concept is also undergoing a change completely. There is no longer a concept
The
of
concept of declared goods
goods is
completely gone.
gone. That's the point.
No, that's I'm talking here to see the philosophy thereof. We did not have articles so far the clause 3 in the original. It came only later on so far I think 5th or 6th constitutional amendment.
Yeah, it has come here. Here they have omitted it.
Now they have omitted it.
And again, if you see, sir, what was there? See, the basic reason why you don't need 286. Why it was needed under GST, you don't require. Yes, maybe you may say that, see, if that was the case, then you should have also Article 366 clause 29A. in the case of our transfer of property of goods in the execution of works contract is a deemed sale of goods. Now here we are talking about taxing supply and GST. The provision 366 clause 29A still remains. We haven't deleted, sir.
No, that remains. That remains.
That remains. That remains. Now you may say that when you deleted 286(3), you should have also deleted that clause 29A of article.
No, sir. There will be problem to delete that one because there is still deemed sale concept you require for supply. For taxing on supply of goods and services are concerned, still that is required.
No, now they will not be required because
not required.
so now they are competent.
It's not required.
Now they are competent, so maybe a composite tax.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so now they don't have to bifurcate. 366(29) contemplated a notional bifurcation.
Yes.
No.
You had to bifurcate. They were still not a power in the state to tax the service component. They could only tax in a goods contract, goods part. So now that is redundant because now they have acquired the constitutional right under 246A to levy a tax on services.
Correct.
Now they are constitutionally competent. Therefore, that restriction itself which is required under 263 is no longer required.
It's not required.
It has become redundant in view of this situation. Yes. Any other question? I know you are all too tired at the end of the day. And so serious question.
I'm a student here. Okay, just he desired, he written the paper on also so for the GST Council and Dispute Settlement Mechanism. So he showed his desire, then we are giving for maximum 10 minutes, and he's just sharing his thoughts or concern. Thank you.
Focus on the things which are not discussed.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. I would like to address two particular issues which was discussed by the learned legal luminaries who spoke before me. One is the relationship between Article 279A11 and Article 131. And the second thing that I would like to discuss about, I would like to rather address, would be the binding nature of the decisions or the adjudication of the GST Council. The first thing that I would like to point out, as Senior Counsel Mr. Ganguly rightly pointed out, Article 131 is the starting point of all the discussions. Now the Article 131 opens with the word to the exclusion of all other courts. So if there is a dispute between a state government and a central government or any intergovernmental dispute, exclusively the Supreme Court shall be the proper forum in that case. Now interestingly, Mr. P. Chidambaram, during the debates, in relation to this GST dispute resolution mechanism, had pointed out that what would happen if this particular dispute resolution body is pitted against the Supreme Court. Now interestingly, Mr. Jaitley argued to the roaring benches of the Parliament that this would be a political question and a political question will not be justiciable. Now the legislature was under the impression that, in fact this is coming in that report of the Rajya Sabha committee and Lok Sabha committee, they have clear, you get an impression that the legislature was under the impression that this would be a political dispute and a political dispute is not justiciable under the, by the courts. Now I would like to attract your attention towards 3 Supreme Court judgments on this issue, the first of which would be State of Karnataka versus Union of India. Therein the Supreme Court without doubt declared that if there is an intergovernmental dispute, it is the Supreme Court which would be having the jurisdiction. So if you see the wording of Article 279A11, it is quite apparent. It perfectly deals with intergovernmental disputes. Now Article 131's second aspect is, what is it that the Supreme Court is deciding under Article 131? It says that the extent of or the existence of any legal right. The extent and existence of a legal right. Now what do you mean by that, extent and existence in the present scenario? Again we have the Supreme Court chipping in State of Rajasthan versus Union of India, wherein the Supreme Court clearly held that if there is a question on the relationship, on the constitutional relationship between the central government and the state government, then definitely Article 131 is the know-all and end-all. Now, what is it that Article 279A is dealing with? Can we not say that it is expressly dealing with the constitutional relationship between the central government and state government? Apparently, Article 246 onwards, if you read, entirely it is all about the relationship between the central government and the state government. So without a doubt, I would say that the dispute or any disagreement that might be arising out of this particular provision is likely to be what State of Rajasthan had the decision State of Rajasthan had contemplated. And even in relation to administrative matters, State of Sirkala versus Union of India, therein the Supreme Court again held that if there is an action by the central executive. Now, as the learned speaker Mr. Khalid Anwar had pointed out, if there is some particular decision on the place of supply, if I'm not, so any decision by the central administrative or the central executive in relation to any of these matters, again by this age-old ruling of 1953, the Supreme Court comes. So under no circumstance can you say that the Supreme Court's jurisdiction is ousted and the exclusion clause bars the jurisdiction or operation of the GST Council. Now, the other point that I would like to raise is that the Supreme Court did in fact expressly rely on the doctrine of political ticket. In both these cases, the Karnataka case and Rajasthan case, the court said that if you put matters beyond the Supreme Court, basically that is not something which the Constitution envisages. So the Supreme Court stopped short of saying that all matters are justiciable. So that is the first submission that I had, that without a doubt any matter entrusted to the dispute resolution mechanism would definitely be covered.
May I just only interrupt to say this, that you have read too much into the dialogue between Chidambaram and Arun Jaitley. Don't read that, they were making political statement to each other.
Yes, sir. So the only aspect that I had borrowed from there was the doctrine of political.
I'm only saying that your foundation is that,
Yes.
but the worth of that statement I am saying is purely political between the two.
Yes.
Don't read more into it. It's not law.
I get it. So now, as Senior Counsel Ganguly had rightly pointed out, if you see the entire frame of the Act, 279B, if you see the frame, the drafter was a really smart man. He basically stated that any dispute would be decided upon by whatever, he used the word modalities. See, the older draft had the word modalities. Now, when the word modalities was there, now as Senior Counsel had rightly pointed out, there were two scenarios. One was harmonization, the second one was loss of revenue. In these two scenarios, the GST dispute resolution body would have adjudicated, and interestingly, just like Article 262, it had an express notwithstanding clause, and it also provided that even the Supreme Court's jurisdiction is expressly barred. So if you just read 279A with B, it had a perfect, they were in perfect sync, and Sushil Kumar Modi, speaking for the states, opposed it tooth and nail in the council. I mean, that is what the reports say, and basically he just told the death knell to that particular article, and that article went away. Now we have to come to what exactly is the wording of the present statute. Now that leads to me to the second issue. You see, the present wording is that the GST Council shall establish a mechanism. Now India is not the first country to have thought of it. Interestingly, the Australians had thought of it back in the 1900s. The Commonwealth Constitution of Australia, under section 101, had a particular provision wherein they had provided for an interstate commission which would adjudicate disputes arising out of interstate trade and commerce. Now the Australian legislature, without wasting further time, in 1912 passed a particular legislation which was the Interstate Commission Act. Now 3 years later, the poor act had to die a sad death. What had happened there? Now, New South Wales versus Commonwealth. In that case, the Interstate Commission, constituted under the particular section 101, had made an adjudication on the validity of particular law. I mean, it was in relation to the transport of goods over water. I think it was on river transport. Anyway, so basically, in that case, the Australian High Court came and held that you can definitely give powers of adjudicator. I am not against it. But if you give powers of adjudication, that would be, to quote the court, ancillary and incidental to determine the questions of fact. So, if there is an interstate commission which is empowered to decide disputes, if we are to take the Australian examples, I would like to submit that from the Australian example, the particular body which the GST Council is going to create might be or is likely to be burdened by this very same limitation, which is it can only decide on ancillary and incidental questions of fact in relation to these questions. Now, which leads me to the last point on the binding nature. Now, on binding nature, I am placing reliance again on only one source, which is basically the Attorney General's opinion. Now, the Rajya Sabha Committee report and the Lok Sabha Committee report, interestingly, has not a small discussion, it has a relevant discussion on the topic. So the Law Ministry had this concern that what happens if the GST Council sits on, GST Council itself decides on disputes within itself, won't it create a conflict? So then they gave the issue to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General was actually quite harsh in coming down against the GST Council, and the draft which the Attorney General had given the opinion on, it really had the Article 279B also. To quote the Attorney General, first he said that he basically talks about the DSA in this particular part. Notwithstanding the decision of the DSA, Dispute Settlement Authority, the ultimate control over the finance will always be that of the legislatures. Now we are talking about an extreme provision which the state themselves found that is so extreme that it's a super legislature, and the Attorney General, who is supposed to be a very sane lawyer, who is supposed to advise the government itself, says that despite such a strongly worded supreme body being in existence, notwithstanding the decision of the DSA, the ultimate control over finance will always be that of the legislatures, legislative supremacy. Now later, he says that, he concludes by saying that the supremacy of the legislature over finance are not affected by the proposed amendments. Again, this is also in the context of the decision making by the GST Council. So the GST Council is just a body which can randomly make recommendations on the basis of now if there is a consensus, then absolutely there is no question of whether it's a recommendation or a decision, because everybody agrees to it and nobody has an issue with it, and that automatically saves. But on the other hand, if somebody has a problem with the recommendation made by the GST Council, then all hell breaks loose. All hell breaks loose. For example, sir had pointed out that West Bengal had given a dissent note. Now, assuming it goes into a dispute, then the Attorney General's, going by this logic, the Attorney General's opinion might come in the form of legislative material and haunt the act and say that even when the extremely tyrannical body was, even in such a scenario, it was only recommendations. It is not binding. So there is a possibility of a dispute. And when a dispute happens, Supreme Court automatically comes into picture, and the dispute has to go to the Supreme Court. And as Professor Vijay Kumar had rightly pointed out, L. Chandra Kumar comes in play, and nothing can be put beyond the power of the Supreme Court. You cannot say GST Council, GST Dispute Resolution Body, in the end will only be an administrative body if it adjudicates on the disputes. So once it adjudicates, you have to go to the Supreme Court. You had 262, the Interstate Water Dispute Authority was there, still it goes to the Supreme Court. So ultimately the matter is put at the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. So if it's ultimately put at the doorstep of the Supreme Court, then why still so much of ink? I understand that a political consensus-based approach is the best approach. But what I find is that if it ever comes to, God forbid, there comes a dispute, then it would be a scenario equal to that we accidentally opened the Pandora's box and we failed to provide for the required protection that was there. I would like to thank the Vice Chancellor and Professor Sanjay Kumar for this opportunity. I am indebted to them for this. Thank you so much.